call this meeting to order, the Blackhawk County Board of Supervisors for June 28, 2022. Roll call, Mr. Beater.
Leyland,
Here.
Little, Schwartz,
Here.
Jelka,
Here.
White.
Here. Have a moment of silence to reflect on our actions of today. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Have the agenda received as proposed or as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next is public comments. Anybody from the public like to comment on anything other than what's on the agenda? Hearing none. Anybody online? Hearing none, move on to claims and payments. Mr. Perry.
The claims this week total $1,642,543.81, of which secondary roads makes up $217,334. Grundy Road Project and Capital Fund 303, $170,160. Elections, $52,407, and we had our mental health disability final payment of their fund balance as we close out 110 in the amount of $885,104. Everything is normal.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, this resolution, please answer as your name is called.
Leyland,
Yes.
Schwartz,
Yes.
Jelka,
Yes.
White.
Yes, resolution adopted. Next is receive project updates from department heads and elected officials. Morning, Kathy.
Good morning, Board. Kathy Nicholas, County Engineer.
Morning.
First of all, I'd like to introduce our new budget analyst, Allison Lake. Comes to us from Hardin County, so she's excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to introducing her to you all and her being an integral part of our team here at the engineer's office. A couple of other things I wanted to mention: that we do have several roads closed in the Bennington Township right now, and that was due to the heavy rains over the weekend. This is primarily Bennington Road, Crane Creek Road. We do anticipate the water going down by Friday, and then we will be retrieving as much rock as we can from the ditch, and then the ditches, and then hauling new rock to correct some of the rock that has washed away. Also in the east of Dunkerton, over on Team Road, that is also closed as well. Also in my absence last week, we did receive a notice from the mayor of Janesville asking for assistance with their bridge replacement costs. As you're probably aware, they are faced with replacing their Green Bridge. Everyone calls it the Green Bridge in Janesville. They are asking for assistance from Blackhawk County for some replacement costs of those bridges. Would you like me to forward that email on to you, or how would you like me to proceed with that?
Sounds good,
I would at
Kathy.
least see it. Yep. Thank
Okay.
you.
Can I answer any questions at this time?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other department heads or elected officials? Anyone online? Hearing none, we'll move on to minutes approved for June 21st, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. We have hearings for an ordinance number 77-265 for a rezone and 77-266 for a rezone after we get through with the rest of the agenda. Moving on to consent agenda by resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on any of the items? Hearing none, this is a resolution. Please answer as your name is called.
Schwartz,
Yes.
Jelka,
Yes.
Leyland,
Yes.
White.
Yes, resolution adopted. Next is contracts and agreements. This is a resolution that the agreement between Blackhawk County Social Services and the State of Iowa Judicial Branch for reimbursement to the Judicial Hospitalization Referee for services performed July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2023, Blackhawk County in the amount not to exceed $53,688.46. Be approved and direct the chair to sign for same.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion on this item? Hearing none, this is a resolution. Please answer your name is called.
Trelka,
Yes.
Leyland,
Yes.
Schwartz,
Yes.
White,
Yes, resolution adopted. Other business. This is a motion that the Beth Van Langen, Financial Management Supervisor, Scott Brown, Motor Vehicle and Operations Manager, and Linda Hinsman, Property Tax Supervisor for Blackhawk County, be authorized to conduct investment and general office transactions in the absence of County Treasurer Rita M. Schmidt.
So moved. Rita, is this something new?
Lois was retired, so this is to update the information.
Just-
for the
Okay.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next is a motion that the appointment of Henry Korf of the Blackhawk County Veterans Affairs Commission be approved effective July 1st, 2022, with the term ending June 30th, 2025.
So
Good
moved.
morning.
Second.
Yeah, please do.
We had 3 applicants, all exceptional. It was a very close decision, but we feel that for the time, for what our composition is, we've got the best candidate here, and we'd like to recommend Henry Korf be appointed as our 5th commissioner, and I'd like to introduce him. Henry?
Great.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to be here, and I retired last June or July of last year after 3 years in Saudi. I joined the Iowa Guard in 1982 when I was in college, so it spanned several years across active duty, Guard, and reserve time as well. And why do I want to participate in the VA board and be part of the commission is the VA has been great to me since I've gotten off of active duty. It's changed my life. The benefits and the services that I receive have really changed my life, and I'd like to be an ambassador because my first VFW meeting I went to, and I heard several disgruntled comments made toward the VA, and I know the VA has made a great effort in the last decade at least to change that image and to reach out to our veterans, and I would like to be that ambassador to those folks that still have that sour taste in their mind and in their mouth from the VA. And so I think I have that opportunity, plus I've had a great experience with the VA, so I want to be able to provide that. So thank you very much.
Welcome on board, Henry.
Thanks, Henry.
Thank you very much.
With that motion, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next is a motion that the personnel requisition for a GIS coordinator full-time new in the IT department with a start date no sooner than July 1st, 2022, be approved as recommended by LU, IT Director. Good morning, Al.
Morning, Board. Al Yu, IT Director. Yep, this is our new full-time FTE, the GIS Coordinator. That is for FY23. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions?
Nope.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Thank you, Al. Next is a 905 hearing on the proposed ordinance number 77-265 AUR Iowa Farm Rezone.
Motion to receive and place on file proof of publication.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Motion to waive the first reading as notice was published on June 20th, 2022 in the Waterloo Courier.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Motion to close the hearing after oral written comments are received and placed on file.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Okay, all right. The Planning and Zoning Commission at a special meeting on May 31st, 2022, reviewed the request by AUR Iowa Farm LLC to rezone 0.96 acres from a agricultural district to CM Commercial Manufacturing District in order to construct a data center at 8226 West Griffith Road, which is a half-mile east of the West Griffith Road and Grundy Road intersection. It was moved by, for the request at the meeting, was moved by AG and seconded by Schaefer to deny the request by AUR Iowa Farm to rezone 0.96 acres from A agricultural district to CM commercial manufacturing district in order to construct a data center at 8226 West Griffith Road. The request was denied with a 5-1 vote at a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on May 31st, 2022. The one parcel containing the 0.96 acres for the proposed rezoned area has been zoned A agricultural district since the adoption of the zoning ordinance in 1982. Surrounding area consists of agricultural lands with some rural homes and is zoned A agricultural district to the north, south, and east. Land to the west, land to the east is zoned A agricultural district and CM commercial manufacturing district. The rezoned area is designated as agricultural on the future land use map, a component of the Blackhawk County Comprehensive Land Use Plan. Surrounding area is designated as agricultural to the south and east. Land to the north and west is designated as parks and open space and agricultural. A small portion of the southwest corner of the rezone area is located in a special flood hazard area. None of the rezone areas located in a special flood hazard area is noted by the yet to be approved FEMA preliminary map. The site has a land evaluation score of 82 and a LISA score of 245, indicating high agricultural value. The property main parcel has a LISA score of 245, which is considered high agricultural value. Zoning ordinance notes that land that is classified as having high agricultural value should be strongly discouraged for development in almost every case. It also states that in general, these sites are reserved for agricultural activities and protected from urban development or urban use encroachment. However, the ordinance states that only under very unique circumstances are these sites to be developed and only after compelling evidence is provided. Zoning ordinance does list several criteria that could be considered unique and compelling evidence. They are as follows. Number one, area has not been in an active row crop production or conservation reserve program for the previous 15 years. Area is not conducive to production by reason of parcel size or shape. Area is compatible with the surrounding uses by reason of similar adjacent uses. Meeting any one of these criteria should not be considered constitute approval, as each request will be reviewed and evaluated based on its individual circumstances. The land is currently in farm production. The data center will provide critical infrastructure support to blockchain systems across the world. The machines will specialize in computing SHA 256 hash functions. The proposed rezone is located along a gravel road. Having a data center on a gravel road in the CM Commercial Manufacturing District requires approval of a special permit. The applicant is applying for a special permit for the data center as part of a separate application. Special permit will go before the Board of Adjustment, the Planning and Zoning Commission at a special meeting on May 31st, denied the special permit request with a 5-1 vote. As part of the site plan review, the site notes 3 data center 50 by 80 hoop buildings, 5 parking spaces, and a commercial building. The site will have up to 78 employees. The data center will only require 1 parking space for every 2 employees, so the parking requirement has been met. The applicant will construct a 16 by 40 commercial building in compliance with the commercial building code requirements. Mary Lynch at 110 East Grundy noted that she's against the project and indicated that approving this request would set a precedent for allowing additional data centers off of Gravel Road in Blackhawk County. Is also concerned about the huge amount of energy they use and for what purpose. The proposed rezone area is not located within the Blackhawk County Waterloo Airport Land Use and Height Overlay Review District. The technical review committee questioned where the water system or septic system will be installed on the site. The site also had a LISA score of 245, indicating high agricultural value. The technical review committee has less concerns regarding this site than the alternate site because they did not have floodplain issues associated with it. And that is the staff report.
Any questions?
Is there anyone here to speak on the project?
Yes. Okay. Yes. If you'd like to come to the podium.
Good morning. Nice to meet you guys. My name is John Paul Barrick. I am the applicant at AUR Iowa Farm for the rezone application. We came to Grundy Center, Iowa in 2019 where we built our first mining data center. And our company is 10 Iowa employees and 5 remote workers. We focus on running and supporting the blockchain infrastructure. We had 2 applications we put in at the Zoning Commission. The first one was in a flood zone. We wanted to ensure that we could get as close to the substation as possible. That application, we did not move forward to this meeting due to the neighbors concerned about how that flood zone would affect their property. So this rezone area a minimal amount is in the flood zone. It was mentioned that I believe 70 employees would be here. It's only going to be 7 employees, so just wanted to clarify that. One of the things that I wanted to address is why can't we do this in an industrial park? The reason being is we work with the Grundy County REC, and they only have 2 other substations. This is one of them that has the available capacity for this mobile data center or modular data center. So there are no other areas in the Grundy County REC footprint that would allow for us to build out. So we have the option of applying for permits here in Black Hawk County. This substation is very close by, or in Grundy County right next door. I'd like to discuss the economic impact of this project. We tried to limit the amount of agricultural land that we were using with the data center to less than 1 acre of land in order to ensure that we can minimize our footprint in agricultural impact. The data center will provide 7 full-time jobs, over $500,000 a year in salary. It'll also provide over $2 million of infrastructure into the area. We'll be upgrading the local electrical grid in tunes to $86,000. We will be hiring local contractors and spending close to $500,000 on those electrical contractors, both coming out of Black Hawk and Grundy County. The community, when we had our zoning and planning meeting, brought up multiple concerns that I'd like to address. The first one was the noise. The mining container uses fans to exhaust the heat that's created from the processing of data. These fans are about 80 decibels and are as loud as a spraying tractor running in a field. Those fans would be running 24/7. That 80 decibel reading is only when you are 3 to 5 feet away from the fans. As you begin to move farther back, it becomes quieter. This opportunity has the ability to build desirable communities, and I believe to change the future and accelerate the 2028 vision of Black Hawk County. Not only are we bringing high-paying IT jobs to the area where they are living locally in the Black Hawk County and Grundy County area, we're also promoting economic vitality by changing the cash flow that's coming to this area. No longer is it going to just be agricultural prosperity from this area, but we're also bringing data center and energy prosperity where we're utilizing that energy to create economic value. I believe this is important to recognize and consider when reviewing this proposal and how we can improve the 2028 vision of transforming Black Hawk County to serve its citizens and allowing it to stay current with advances in technology to best possible serve the public. Now, there are some landowners today here that will share their concerns about this data center, and each one of those concerns is valid. And we have worked to address those concerns to ensure that, one, their land does not get flooded as we construct due to not being constructed in a flood zone anymore. 2, that the noise is minimized by putting up a sound.
Sorry about that.
No worries. A sound deafening. A sound deafening fence, and ensuring that the site remains clean. I'm happy to answer any questions about the project or about the organization. We are looking at other counties as well to deploy in, but this project is crucial for our development, as we already have purchased the infrastructure and the electrical switchgear needed components to deploy in this area.
Mr. Trelka, any questions? Nope. Ms. Leyland?
I think you've somewhat answered the questions that I had. One was going to be, what do you look for in a site, the criteria for a location site, and I think you answered that. It's the substation.
Yeah, it's the electrical substation. This electrical substation was overbuilt, and there's not much load at the area. So we provide our services and run that facility during the day, but during the afternoons, from 3 to 5 p.m., we will actually shut off the facility and provide the energy back to the community in order for reducing the carbon footprint of the community from having to go ahead and turn on coal and natural gas plants to meet those consumers' demand. So we act as something called a demand response resource.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Schwartz, any questions?
I just want to verify, because they don't explicitly say, this is a crypto mining operation. To me, this has nothing to do with our 2028 vision. This is a giant energy hog. Communities that have allowed these into them are seeing skyrocketing utility costs and really regretting their decisions. And so I just want to be clear, the economic promises here are, I don't buy them. 7 jobs to be this giant energy hog. This is not something that I want to see in our community as we try to address climate change.
Understand those concerns, Chris. The grid needs to meet those energy demands, and the sustainable energy that we have with the wind and solar farms in this area are unable to gain grid penetration without load that can be balanced and turned off. So we feel that we are accelerating the move towards renewable energy by adding demand response resources onto the grid.
My question regarding this is the same application or you would have provided or done that you did previously in Grundy Center, correct?
Yes, and that application was denied specifically because the noise next to a walking path, and that was for the other substation. So that walking path was in about 100 feet away from the proposed location. They came back to us and said, if you find another location close by, we'll be happy to discuss that location.
Okay. And I think you answered that earlier. There are no other locations.
We're still in the process of looking. This application was filed right around the time of that meeting.
Oh, okay. So it's possible there still could be something in Grundy County?
Yeah, it's possible, and there's also other options in Grundy County potentially available.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to speak other than what's been said? Come on up, sir. State your name and address, please.
My name's Bryce Moore. I live at 10227 Grundy Road, which is right south of this proposed area. I find it extremely frustrating that I'm required to be here today to defend my property from someone who lives out of state who wants to build a server room in the middle of a cornfield. I'm sorry if I sound unprepared, but for some reason the county never informed me that this project was going on. That will likely have a greater impact on my property than my surrounding neighbors. And I've known about it for 12 hours. So the first time I met JP, I arrived home from work and he pulled into my driveway and he pitched his Bitcoin endeavor, but I wasn't interested. I explained to him that I grew up in the country. I'm a country boy. I love the country. It's quiet. It's not the city. And he said he understood. He looked at me. He goes, I get it. And then I never heard from him again. But now I find out, from the sounds of it, he's been trying to build a facility right outside my bedroom window ever since. Literally right outside my bedroom window. And again, I was never informed. The main issue here is I bought my ground in 2018 to build my dream home. It'll be completed in a few months. If I'm forced to listen to this server fan farm of 80 decibels or louder, according to JP, and when I talked to him, it was a lot more than 5 feet. You were in the hundreds. If I'm forced to listen to that for the foreseeable future, then they can buy my farm as well, because I have no interest in being part of this experiment. If Grundy Center can shut down his building plans when it involves a park that the city just put a lot of money into, then I have a right to shut it down when it involves a property that I just put a bunch of money into. I have 3-bedroom windows that have a straight line of sight to this proposed facility. Let's not forget the noise. How many of you would build your dream home next to this facility? Does JP live next to a facility? Please don't let this nightmare become a reality. I've lost too much sleep over it already.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Just one question.
Sure.
Sir, could you point on this map where your property is? Because it's not obvious.
You're not showing it. I don't know how. Do I scroll here? Is that?
I mean, that's
It's right there.
Okay. So I am right. I would be right here.
Okay.
You said south of Griffith, right?
Yeah.
Bryce? Okay. Okay. You said south of Griffith?
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Barbara Glazner. I live at 808 Cedar Lane in Waverly, Iowa. However, this is my family farm that is affected. I am a member of the Natalie Glazner, one of the executors of the Natalie Glazner Trust, or trustees of the Natalie Glazner Trust, that owns the ground just to this fence line right here along, this is our field here and back across the road.
Maybe it'd be helpful if you pointed that out
Okay,
on ours for
sorry.
us. No, I just meant it didn't
Yes.
relay on both.
Okay, so this is our field, and to the back, this is our cousin Scott's field. Okay, so this is a fence, so it's kind of touchy because it's family. I'm also a member and a trustee for the Roger Dale Trust, which takes care of our Aunt Alice. So the income that comes from that is what keeps her quality of life, and she's in senior living facility right now. So we need to keep that up.
That's currently farmed now, correct?
Yes. So, and I also have my own ground that's just north of that area, that's just off the site there. So I have a lot of vested, and what I'm saying is that a vested interest in this. One of the things the gentleman alluded to was that why is this not going into a industrial park? Because personally, this is good farm ground. I hate to see it moved into anything other than farming. It's been farmed for as long as I've known the ground, and that's been a while. And my grandfather owned it beforehand, and it was farmed, and the two properties come from the ground that my grandfather owned. So I hate to see it moved out into commercial. I also am like Mary, that I'm concerned that you're opening a Pandora's box by doing this, and that more could, a precedent can be set that you might not be able to stop. My nephew, who couldn't be here today because he had to work, he and my sister farm the ground. One of his concerns was these are open-ended hoop houses that bring 90-degree heat year-round. Just north of where you're at, less than half a mile, is the Black Hawk Creek. Less than half a mile to the west, the creek curves along. There's a lot of wildlife in that area. And I'm sorry, if you're a coon or a possum or a deer, are you not going to go toward the heat when it's cold out? When the weather, are you going to look at an open facility that you might be able to get out of the weather in? It seems like you're going to increase problems with critters. It also seems that if it's giving off that much heat, what's it going to do? It's going to create a microclimate, and what's that going to do to the crops that are growing in that area? Well, how is that going to affect insects, attraction to insects, which can be damaging to crops? And it's not going to be just limited to this 0.96 acres. It's going to draw for all of us to have that increased pestilence. So that, and the other thing that we were concerned with is the driveway. Our current driveway is right there along that fence line, right where that corner is along the road. And how will the access for the 7 people that work there impact us? How will the sanitation needs of those people impact us? What will happen with water? The water needs for the humans that are living there. My nephew's concerned with how will the power get to that? Will that somehow invade our field so that we have to worry about hitting things that wouldn't be good for anybody in the area? I've been at my sister's house. I've worked there. I know they've had issues with brownouts in the past. I know that the internet already is kind of iffy at times because there's no fiber cable there. It's all through the air. I don't know what the technical term is. So there's some concerns for how this will impact the people that are currently on that power grid and currently using the internet in that area. I guess those are the things that come off the top of my head. I think there are better places. I know that in Black Hawk County there are places that have industrial parks with power grids. that are substations that are bigger than this one that's right there in that area. I understand he's already connected with Grundy County. I'm not sure how that benefits Blackhawk County, but I understand his concern with getting the best that he can do for his company so he can make the most profits. That's what business is about, is minimizing your cost to maximize your profits. But that's also what agriculture is about. So, any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Janelle Glazner Koningsfeld. I actually live straight west of the property. I'm at the end of the REC line, and I have had issues with, lights flickering. We've had, where they've asked us to reduce power and stuff. Also, I work for an ag firm. You're going to have a 90-degree unit here. Granted, it's only an acre, but that's going to push out heat. So what does that affect my crop? So it's we're dry, and I'm going to have more heat coming off that. That's going to affect my crop. It's an acre. Granted, it's not a huge amount of ground, but still, you're setting a precedence to pop these little things out in the country, and that's an issue. This is not the best agricultural ground in the world because we do have a flood possibility, but this corner of my cousin's field doesn't usually ever flood. But we're also in a culture where we have climate warming, and it's flooded more in my life than it did in my parents' life. And the more we build up in the towns and we prevent the water from flooding the towns, it backs it up on our property too. So that changes things for us. So I just think I don't have an issue with Bitcoin mining. I don't quite understand it all, if you want to know the truth. But I don't think this is an agricultural area. I get that REC Power is only 4 cents and Alliance 6 cents, and he wants to maximize profit. But there's other places in the state and in the area, I think, that would be better suited than this particular spot.
Thank you.
I agree.
Yep, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing none?
No.
Oh.
My name is Johnny Snyder, 10227 Grundy Road. The .96 acre parcel located near 8226 West Griffith Road should not be switched from an agricultural district to a commercial manufacturing district for several reasons. Ag zoning is intended to protect farmland and farming activities from non-farm uses. A Bitcoin mining center is inconsistent with the zoning of the properties in the area. The property has a high CSR of 82, as mentioned before. It's not possible to make more high-quality farm ground in Iowa. Once a structure is built, the ground will never be the same. If the business fails in a few years, it won't be a desirable location for another business and won't be desirable for farmland. You don't need a degree. Second, you don't need a degree in economics like I have to understand that the increase in demand for energy for this company will negatively impact neighbors with decreased supply and increased rates. JP Barrett bragged on his Instagram and TikTok pages about his $63,739.48 electric bill from August 31st, 2020 to September 30th, 2020. I don't think the neighbors are bragging about their electric bills. Another TikTok shows that he used $3,383.67 of power in only 24 hours. An article from the Gazette states, the Grundy Center site, which he owns, uses more electricity than all the residential customers in Grundy Center, a population of 2,800 combined. The article goes on to say that the break-even for residential customers is 4,900. Grundy County's census shows there's 5,146 households, so that's 95% of the households is what his energy costs. As we've seen for that point number 3, it's not eco-friendly. That's not the best use of our energy. They try to make arguments that this is good, but it's not. It's not beneficial to the Grundy REC customers. It's not good for neighboring customers. I think if anyone lives in Cedar Falls, there's a recent article about there might be possible blackouts in Cedar Falls too. I imagine they're not able to get their power on the grid from Grundy anymore because JP's using it all. So it affects everyone. We're gonna have energy issues because of people like him. Number 4, the physical and psychological health consequences of regular exposure to elevated sound levels are well documented. Before casting a vote in favor of this project, please do research on how your vote would harm the people in your community. Number 5, I heard that these operations were loud, but thought maybe they weren't as bad as I've heard. So I went out there last night at 9:30 at night. Let me put my volume up. In this video, you can see how far it is, very distant, probably at least a quarter of a mile, if not a half mile away. And I will play that for you. This is a half mile away. This is about 100 feet away. I can get it closer if you want to see this. Here's right next, on the road, but right next to it. Would you want to listen to that at your house? I also found a video of them giving a tour of their property on YouTube under a YouTuber, Grant Hilbert. So this would be inside their property.
Kind of what you'll see in traditional data centers.
You can barely hear the guy talking. It's so loud. So if you would want to, would you want to live by that? Would you want to hear the stream from a half mile away, or would you want to hear this from a quarter mile away? Those videos that I took were at 9:30 p.m. That's when people go to bed. That's when kids go to bed. Would you ever be able to get a restful night's sleep? You do not have to 100% trust my videos, but if you go out there, you would hear the same sounds that I heard. And you might think that it was louder than the videos that I showed you. Would you want to live anywhere close to this? Lastly, I found several articles talking about other Bitcoin facilities that have been put up in other areas. The Washington Post has an article titled, "An Appalachian town was told a Bitcoin mine would bring an economic boon. It got noise pollution and an eyesore." The Wall Street Journal, "Bitcoin mining noise drives neighbors nuts. A giant dentist drill that won't stop." There's countless articles like that in every community that they put one up in. It's even in our local.
I think you've given us enough information.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of the motion to close the hearing, do I have a motion and a second? All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried. This is a resolution to suspend the rules requiring the Board of Supervisors to consider and vote on the proposed ordinance at 2 prior meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? This resolution, please answer as your name is called.
Leyland.
Yes.
Schwartz.
Yes.
Trelka. Yes. White.
Yes, resolution adopted. Next is an ordinance adoption, that ordinance amending ordinance number 36 as amended, the Blackhawk County, Iowa Agricultural Preservation Zoning Ordinance adopted February 2nd, 1999 by adding subsection 265 to section 6B rezoning certain property as described on the above request submitted by AUR Iowa Farm LLC to consider the same for adoption, and if adopted would be known as Ordinance 77-265.
So, Mr.
Second.
Trinan, this is, a vote yes is to deny, to support the denial?
Need to move to. No, I think a vote no
We need
would be to deny.
Okay.
A vote yes would be to adopt the ordinance, which would support the change.
Thank you.
So do you want a motion to approve or to deny?
I would like to change it to a motion to deny.
Wouldn't that be easier, Mike?
Yeah, we can do that. Now a motion, or a yes would be to deny the change.
Whoever thought this was a good idea?
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please answer your name as called.
Schwartz,
Yes.
Trelka,
Yes.
Leyland,
Yes.
White.
Yes, resolution adopted. Or denied.
And Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask our planning and zoning staff to bring the board language on a moratorium of crypto mining operations in Blackhawk County.
Seth said yes. I don't know if you could hear.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Next is a 907 hearing, proposed ordinance number 77-266, Binkdorf rezone. Motion to receive and place on file, proof of publication.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Motion to waive the first reading.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, aye.
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 Motion carried. Motion to close the hearing after oral written comments are received and placed on file.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Moved and seconded.
Okay, yeah, the Planning and Zoning Commission at a special meeting on May 31st, 2022, reviewed the request by Josh and Hannah Mixdorf to rezone 1.5 acres from Agricultural District to AR Agricultural Residential District in order to construct one new single-family home located at 4844 Shank Road, which is 400 feet east of the Shank Road and East Tuckerton Road intersection. It was moved by Schaefer and seconded by Shares to approve the request by Josh and Hannah Mixdorf to rezone 1.5 acres from Agricultural District to AR Agricultural Residential District. The request was approved with a 5-1 vote at a special meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission on May 31st, 2022. The one parcel containing the 1.5 acres for the proposed rezone area has been zoned A Agricultural District since the adoption of the zoning ordinance in 1982. Surrounding area consists of agricultural lands with some rural homes and is zoned A Agricultural District. To north, south, and east, land to the west is zoned Agricultural District and RM, Residential Multiple District. Rezone area is designated as agricultural on the future land use map, a component of the Blackhawk County Land Use Plan. Surrounding area is designated as agricultural to the north, south, east, and west. None of the rezone areas located in a special flood hazard area is designated by the FEMA 2011 floodplain map and the FEMA preliminary map. This site does have a high land evaluation score of 97 and Lisa score of 266, indicating high agricultural value. Property parcel has a Lisa score of 266, which is considered a high value agricultural site. Zoning ordinance notes that land that is classified as having a high agricultural value should be strongly discouraged for development in almost every case. It also states that in general these sites are reserved for agricultural activities and protected from urban development or urban use encroachment. However, the ordinance also states that only under very unique circumstances are these sites to be developed, and only after compelling evidence is provided. Zoning ordinance does lists of criteria that could be considered unique and compelling evidence. They are as follows. Area has not been an active row crop production or conservation reserve CRP for the previous 15 years. The area is not conducive to production by reason of parcel size or shape. Area is compatible with surrounding use and by region of similar adjacent uses. Meeting any one of these criteria should not constitute approval, as each request will be reviewed and evaluated based on its individual circumstances. The rezone area is currently not being farmed and is pasture land. The applicant will inherit the farm in the future and will take over agricultural duties. Planning and Zoning Commission approved the request with a 5-1 vote at a special meeting on May 31st. The proposed rezone area is not located in the Blackhawk County Waterloo Airport Land Use High Overlay Review Area. The Technical Review Committee noted the high land evaluation score of 97 and high leases score of 266 for the property, which indicates high agricultural value. However, it was noted by the Technical Review Committee that the land appear to be pasture and is not currently in farm production. So that's
Thank you,
the
Seth.
staff report.
There was one person opposed. Do you recall why?
It was Bozier. He didn't say.
Okay.
So I'm not exactly quite sure.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because
We talked about that at meetings when they should say why
they
they're-
should say, but sometimes they
Okay.
don't.
No. We'll call him on it. I think he was one of those that mentioned it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Next, a resolution to suspend the rules requiring the Board of Supervisors to consider and vote on the proposed ordinance at 2 prior meetings.
There might be people who want to speak.
Well, that's right, sorry. Anyone want to speak on behalf of this or against it?
Or against it.
Yeah, we weren't quite sure what was just happening.
Yeah.
I'm Josh Maxdorf. This is my wife, Hannah. I'm just going to come over here and show you real quick just so you understand. So this right here was where the grandparents' house used to be. The 08 tornado took it. And since then, all these buildings are new. So the farm has kind of developed around it. This has been where we store our silage bags and our corn stalk bales for a while. We just recently planted 300 trees here to create a new windbreak that'll go on to mom and dad. So this is where mom and dad built their house back in '88. So we're going to continue to expand, basically keep the building site here instead of having to expand building sites north, just to kind of keep everything more central. Since the tornado also, this has been kind of a manure pit. So you can't see it, but right about here, there's about 150 cattle. So we have to zone out 1.5 acres to build the house. And so in order to get that 1.5 acres, we either have to take one of the buildings with us, or we have to zigzag up into this area. So with talking with our land surveyor, they just said it would be easier if we just moved the whole land parcel up here. That gets us away from the cattle, and that also gets us to a place where we can keep the buildings all centralized. So this is already one residential area. We're just basically moving the parcel from here over to here. We'll maintain having the driveway on the gravel. We won't put a highway-based drive into the farm or into the house. So the driveway will come around this roundabout, and then it'll go right in front of the grain bin, and this will become the driveway into the house. So it's just kind of an easy way to describe that to you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Julie McStorff. I live in the house on 4924 Shank Road. And so this house would go right behind us. This farm has been in the McStorff family since 1880. We came before the supervisors back in 97, 96 to build our house there and got approval because we built on a pasture. So, and since the tornado, basically, McStorff has lived on that farm since 1880. And we're getting older. The farming is getting a little much for cattle, calving in the middle of the night. So it would be nice to have Josh and Hannah right there, especially calving all hours of the night. And calves getting out once in a while in the barn, running amok. But again, they don't get out anymore. So we have good terms with all our neighbors. And again, this would not go on the highway. It would come off the gravel road, as that is a very dangerous intersection. We have all come off the gravel road. So we would welcome new neighbors and hope this goes through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to speak for or against it? Hearing none, this is a resolution to suspend the rules and requiring the Board of Supervisors to consider and vote on the proposed ordinance at 2 prior meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? This is a resolution. Please answer as your name is called.
Jelka?
Yes.
Leyland?
Yes.
Schwartz?
Yes.
White?
Yes, resolution adopted. This is an ordinance adoption that the ordinance amending ordinance number 36 is amended the Blackhawk County, Iowa Agricultural Preservation Zoning Ordinance adopted February 2nd, 1999 by adding subsection 266 to section 6B, rezoning certain property as described in the above request submitted by Josh and Hannah Mixdorf, and to consider the same for adoption, and if adopted would be known as ordinance number 77-266.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, this resolution, please answer as your name is called.
Leyland?
Yes.
Schwartz?
Yes.
Trelka?
Yes.
White?
Yes, resolution adopted. Moving on to discussion in all aspects of ARP consulting with Baker Tilly.
Good morning. So we will have Tom Calico, and it looks like Doug was on a little bit earlier. But this is just really an opportunity for Baker Tilly to get in front of the Board of Supervisors and present some educational standpoints as well as getting in front of you to answer any questions. So with that being said, Tom, I'll let you take it away.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Morning.
I am fresh back from a week off of vacation, so I am trying to get back in the groove here. So, but I think you've given me enough time, thankfully, with the public hearing to get myself back in the work environment. So it's good to be with you all again today. I've got a presentation that I'll go through. I'm not going to go through every bit of it. Your staff has it if you want to review some of the detail that I don't cover. But I wanted to give you a sense as you go into the spending of your ARP award. I wanted to give you a broad sense of what's eligible, what's ineligible, and the processes that are necessary to evaluate different projects and make sure that that they're all eligible and spent properly. So I'm going to share my screen here in just a moment, and we'll get started. Thanks. Okay. James, are you seeing the presentation now?
Yeah, you're on the screen.
Okay, awesome. So, the agenda for this morning, we're going to go through the essential elements of a successful American Rescue Plan process, eligible and ineligible uses, and just touch briefly on compliance and reporting. We've spent quite a bit of time thinking about what makes a process for the American Rescue Plan successful, and we've come up with a group of essential elements. We've used a tried and true kind of approach, the plan, do, check, act approach that some of you may have studied if you went to management school like I did. We've modified it a little bit to plan, perform, monitor, and improve, which we think is a little more descriptive. And you'll see listed in these various columns here on the screen what we see the essential elements. We're right there at the beginning. In education is key, obviously, to any kind of process like this. And under planning, it's interesting when we did this, planning is really where most of the work occurs, and that makes sense, right? If you start out with a well-planned process, it usually goes well. So there's a whole bunch of things under here. Perform is where we get into the nitty-gritty. This is where we're actually evaluating projects and getting into reporting. Monitoring is essential for particularly where you have cases where you're doing sub-recipients, and I'll explain a little bit later what that means. But then also complying with the various requirements of the grant, what is generally referred to as the uniform guidance, and I'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then improving is essentially reflecting on how the process is going from time to time and making the necessary improvements. As we've just, some of you on this in this meeting have discussed with us previously, we're really going to be focusing largely in the perform phase. You all have already gotten well started, and you're now at the point where you're beginning to propose projects and evaluate those. So we're going to be jumping quite a bit right over into that part of the process, and I'll talk about how we're going to be assisting with you with that. As we get into eligible and ineligible uses, there are some overarching prohibitions that are contained in the American Rescue Plan rules. So these are just, the absolutely thou shalt nots. And there are 4 of them. The first one is payment of debt service. So you cannot use any of your award to pay existing debt, new debt. The second one is reserve. So you can't put the American Rescue Plan funds into a reserve fund or any kind of sinking fund, rainy day fund. And that's understandable, right? I mean, the American Rescue Plan was created with the intent of achieving certain objectives in terms of public health and helping disadvantaged populations and replacing public sector revenues and building certain types of capital improvements. So putting the money into reserves doesn't really accomplish those goals. The third one is you can't pay any legal settlements or judgments. And the last is you can't make any extraordinary pension contributions, any extraordinary pension contributions. And the word extraordinary there is key because in some cases, as we'll talk about, you can pay salaries and benefits, and that would include pension contributions, but those are not considered extraordinary. So this would be if you've got a pension fund that is lagging and you want to put a bunch of money into it to try and prop up the pension fund, that you cannot do. I also wanted to touch on here some very good advice from the Government Finance Officers Association that I think is helpful for, as guiding principles to use of American Rescue Plan funds. So this is not in the rule. This is something in addition, but this is your government officers professional association giving you advice, and I think it's worth listening to. The first is to apply the award primarily to non-recurring expenditures, right? We don't want to fall into the fiscal trap of using one-time money for recurring expenditures, like operating expenditures, like salaries particularly. Obviously that creates a great problem, because once those one-time monies are gone and those recurring expenditures keep hitting, then it's a real problem of, okay, where are we going to come up with that money? So good advice from the GFOA. The other is to consider state and regional initiatives. There's a great opportunity with the American Rescue Plan to do great things by pooling funds together and working together. And so I think that's also good advice. And then the GFOA was quick to point out that, we got plenty of time here. We've got till the end of 24 to obligate. We've got till the end of 26 to expend the funds. So it makes sense to take time and carefully consider. And I know the county has done that, has been thoughtful, leading into engaging us and working with us on your expenditures. So right at the outset, I wanted to talk about revenue loss. Typically, this is like the last one that comes up if you read through all of the U.S. Treasury's guidance on the American Rescue Plan. They usually don't talk about this one until the end, but I think it makes sense to talk about it right at the front because it really colors everything that you're going to do. So the final rule for the American Rescue Plan included a provision which was really, really friendly for a lot of smaller governments across the U.S. And that was there was an ability to determine revenue loss by one of 2 methods. And revenue loss is essentially, hey, during the height of the pandemic, particularly during the shutdown of the economy, we lost revenue, and that could be in various forms, right? I mean, particularly what you see it most is, like in tourism communities, obviously, tourism was down, there's a lot of lost revenue. Communities that have airports, the airports were virtually shut down. But even in communities that don't have those things, they may have suffered some revenue loss as a result of less economic activity during the height of the pandemic. So there was an ability to determine that revenue loss by one of two methods. The first is a standard allowance of $10 million. So you can just say, all right, we had, and I should say it's standard allowance of $10 million up to the amount of your award. Now, of course, the county having received around $25 million, obviously you're greater than that. So what that means for all of you is you could say, all right, we're going to take a standard allowance of $10 million, which is what I understand you all did. The other is you can do a calculation based on the actual loss using a methodology that the U.S. Treasury has prescribed. But we took the first one. So we know we've got this $10 million in aggregate of revenue loss. Now, how can you use those funds? Well, this is the most flexible of all of the expenditure categories in the American Rescue Plan. Because what it says is if any money that is deemed, any portion of the award that is deemed revenue loss can be spent on the provision of government services. What is the provision of government services? Well, you won't find a very clear definition in the rule, but based on what we have been able to find and basically what we're seeing across all of the professional associations who are tracking this and all of the other governments who are working on this is basically the provision of government services is anything that the county can legally expend funds for. So keep in mind, the American Rescue Plan doesn't create any legal authority to spend funds that the county didn't have prior to the pandemic. So essentially, anything that you were legally allowed to spend funds on prior to the pandemic, you can spend the portion of the award that is deemed revenue loss.
Read something that was written for.
Is there a question there?
I would have had at least an outline.
No, but Al, can you mute Cindy?
All right. So, so as I go through eligibility, I think it's useful to keep this in mind right up front, that we have a little less than half the award that we can expend it on any provision of government services. Now we start to get into the other expenditure categories, which are a bit more restrictive. So the first of those that I want to talk about is kind of what I would call the health and human services umbrella. You've got various things on here. You've got public health, right, which obviously a big part of the American Rescue Plan was addressing the public health needs across the country. And this includes things that you would expect to see: vaccination, testing, prevention in congregate settings, mental health, substance abuse, anything that is public health related. Then you have another section here that's called the negative economic impact. So this was about trying to help portions of the population who were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic to get back on their feet. So food, cash, rental assistance, job training, that kind of thing. And then further into the disproportionately impacted communities, things that might help in terms of coming back, education being a big part of those, health, housing. The one thing we saw in the final rule, as opposed to the interim rule, is some greater specificity on who exactly is eligible. And it's along households, businesses, nonprofits. There are definitions. And I'm going to go through these quickly. Don't expect you or ask you to memorize these. You'll have them if you want them. But I think the important point to take away is, to the degree that we want to do projects in this area of public health, negative economic impacts, just remember that there are certain groups that are generally considered to be eligible by definition in the rule. So that's the important point to keep in mind. So for households and communities, there are income criteria whereby we can define certain individuals or groups as impacted or disproportionately impacted being a higher level. And what that means is it doesn't mean necessarily that just because we're serving an impacted or disproportionately impacted individual or group, that whatever we're proposing is eligible. What it does mean is that if it meets one of the other enumerated criteria, it strengthens the eligibility. So it doesn't create eligibility unto itself. It still has to be one of the enumerated uses, but it does strengthen the eligibility. Similarly, for nonprofits, there are definitions for impacted and disproportionately impacted nonprofits, based largely on how the revenues were impacted. Again, still needs to meet one of the enumerated uses, but it does strengthen eligibility. For small businesses, we've got a similar type of thing in terms of financial impact and location, whether they're in qualified census tracts. And again, strengthens eligibility, doesn't create unto itself. And for industries, we've got a couple of categories here. You have travel and tourism, which is a separate kind of category unto itself. Generally, businesses that are based on travel and tourism are presumed to be impacted. And then for other industries, the presumption of impact is based largely on employment. So I'm going to skip over to infrastructure now. As you may recall, the rule prescribes that certain types of infrastructure are enumerated uses under the Act. Generally referred to as water, sewer, and broadband. Under water and sewer, it's a little bit of a misnomer because water and sewer is a little bit bigger than that. It's really water, sewer, wastewater, and then expanded to include certain types of stormwater, wells, dams. So it's a bit broader. But the key thing here is what the Act says is, some of you may be familiar with the state revolving loan fund programs, the clean water and drinking water revolving loan fund programs. So one of the things that they did in the Act, which I think was pretty smart and helpful, is they basically said, hey, if a project is eligible under your state's clean water or drinking water revolving loan fund program, then it's eligible under the American Rescue Plan, which is great because it provides some specificity. Now, it doesn't mean that the county would have to actually get a clean water or drinking water loan or grant through the state. It only means that it would be eligible under their criteria, and then you can use your American Rescue Plan funds for this. Broadband, I'm sure you've heard a lot about broadband through the American Rescue Plan. The priority here is really on last mile technology. And the thing to keep in mind here is there are some pretty restrictive requirements in terms of speed that has to be achieved. So there's a requirement to provide at least 100 bits per second of download or 20 bits per second upload. It takes a pretty substantial improvement to meet these speeds. So that's the thing to keep in mind. The priority is on underserved households and businesses. There is also some ability to do cyber security investments. The next expenditure category I want to cover is premium pay. There is an ability under the American Rescue Plan to do premium pay both for governmental workers, so workers of the county, but also to do it in the private sector as well. There are the restrictions on how far you can go. You can provide up to an additional $13 per hour, not to exceed $25,000 total for the life of the award per individual. There are certain thresholds for eligibility. The main thing is that it needs to be, an eligible worker. And what are eligible workers? So essentially, they are workers who either who during the height of the pandemic came in contact with others, or came into regular contact with things that were handled by others. And again, this can be either private or public sector. Then there's a area called public sector capacity. And here there actually is the ability for local governments to hire back employees from pre-pandemic positions, or to even hire above pre-pandemic baseline employment up to 7.5% above your baseline. I think it's really important, going back to the advice from the Government Finance Officers Association, to think carefully when deciding to use some of the award for hiring. Because it goes back to, remember, the GFOA's first point, which was, let's make sure we're using one-time money for one-time expenditures. So obviously hiring back employees or hiring above pre-pandemic baseline will result in recurring expenditures. So, my word of caution on this particular expenditure category is, if this is something that the county is interested in pursuing, then there really needs to be a plan in place as to how we're going to pay those salaries and benefits after the expenditure of the award. There's another category called effective service delivery. Basically what this is essentially authorization that you can use your award for the administration of the award, which makes perfect sense. All right, I'm going to pause before I go into the next section to see if anybody has any questions on eligibility.
Nope.
Okay, great. All right, let's talk about compliance and reporting. This is really one of the most important things I'm going to tell you this morning, and that is your award is governed by what's generally referred to as the uniform guidance. So what this essentially is years ago, after the federal government had been giving out awards for grants for various things for many years, and every grant had its own unique set of requirements, and somebody suggested wisely, hey, maybe we should come up with sort of like uniform requirements for all federal grants, and then people don't have to work so hard to figure out what they should do for this one and that one. And so they did. They adopted the uniform guidance, and it applies to all the uses of all federal awards, and applies to the American Rescue Plan. So there are a variety of things that it covers. It covers requirements for internal controls. It covers what's eligible as far as administrative costs. It covers what you can do with investment of program income, and investment of the award and program income. And oh, by the way, in case you didn't know it, one of the somewhat cool things about the American Rescue Plan is, to the degree that you're investing it, which hopefully you are, and you're earning interest on it, you get to keep that interest, and you can use it for whatever you want. You don't actually have to use the interest for the uses required under the American Rescue Plan. And of course, back not too long ago, you couldn't really earn much on anything, but with interest rates coming up now, there's the potential to earn some decent interest. So hopefully you're investing it well. But the uniform guidance does cover what you can do as far as investment of money and any program income if you happen to have projects that actually produce income, like say a loan program, for example. Very importantly, the uniform guidance covers procurement and purchasing. So this is essentially when you go out and you're making purchases with your award, it governs what you have to do, the rules you have to abide by in that purchasing. And this is the area of the American Rescue Plan that I think is going to trip up the greatest number of local governments across the United States, particularly local governments who don't have a lot of experience with federal awards. This is an area that they just may not be aware of, but this is the area where they're most likely to make a mistake. So we will be working with you and your staff to make sure that you're aware of the procurement and purchasing requirements and abiding by those. Then there is sub-recipient monitoring, and I'll talk a little bit more in just a bit about what exactly is a sub-recipient. But in certain cases where you're passing a portion of your award to another entity, and they essentially are kind of administering that award on your behalf, that portion of the award on your behalf, there are special requirements as far as monitoring to make sure that that subrecipient is doing the proper things. And then there's a single audit requirement for entities that spend more than $750,000 a year in federal awards. There's what's called a single audit, looking at basically auditing your use of the federal award at the level of award that the county received. A single audit is pretty much a guaranteed thing. So that's another area of uniform guidance compliance. So very, very important. Can't stress enough. This is an area that we'll be working with your staff on to make sure that you're complying with everything. And because, like I said, this is the place where I think we're going to see the greatest amount of trouble in terms of ARPA implementation. All right, so I promised I'd talk about recipients and what are subrecipients, so here we are. When you're distributing the award, you're going to generally be distributing to three types of entities. Let's start with the simplest one. So let's say you decide you want to go out and buy something. You want to buy, hey, let's stock up on personal protective equipment, masks, and hand sanitizer and the like. And so you go out and you find somebody who sells those materials and you buy some. All right, that's a contractor. So that's where you're basically buying a defined good or service, usually involves getting some bids or quotes. This is one of the most simple ways of using the award and requires very little in the way of reporting and basically no monitoring. I'm going to jump all the way to the other side of the page now and talk about beneficiaries. So in this case, this is where you are giving a portion of your award to the ultimate user for some purpose that, again, is defined in the Act. So, for examples would be you decide to start a program that provides rental assistance, and as part of that program, you give money to to a family to help them pay their rent. They would be a beneficiary. Let's see, what would be another good example? You decide to help with testing, and you give money to people to help them get tested for COVID. They would be a beneficiary. Generally, what you see here is there's usually some sort of eligibility requirement. They are the end user of the money. They are not passing the money on to anybody else in terms of, and they're not determining policy, so to speak. They're not helping the county towards implementation of its ARPA goals. That type of role is what's called the subrecipient. When we start getting into passing money and then giving another entity control over those funds and determining eligibility and helping with the county's mission through the ARPA, now we're talking about subrecipients. And so an example of this would be, let's go back to rental assistance. You decide you want to do rental assistance, but instead of handing it to to beneficiaries, you decide to work together with a nonprofit. And you say, look, we don't know a whole lot about this, but you do. Would you, we'll give you X dollars, and then you determine, you create the eligibility criteria, you identify the ultimate beneficiaries, and you hand out the money. Okay, now that not-for-profit would be a subrecipient. And under the ARPA Act and the uniform guidance that we talked about previously, there are requirements to set up agreements with subrecipients that have very specific provisions. There are requirements that the subrecipients be monitored on a regular basis to make sure that they're complying with the uniform guidance, the agreements, and your goals. And there's a requirement that they report up to you on their activities, because you, the county, would be responsible for reporting on their activities. They don't report directly to the Treasury. They report up to you, and then you report to the U.S. Treasury. So the takeaway here is we need to have kind of a heightened awareness of where we're creating a subrecipient, a subaward to a subrecipient. And we want to make sure we catch that as early in the process as possible so that we can make sure that all the provisions are adhered to. There is a distinction in the American Rescue Plan Act between what are called enumerated and non-enumerated uses. The Act is very specific, very clear that, yes, all through the Act it lists out here are potential uses of the funds. But they also are quick to point out it is a non-exclusive list, and that award recipients like the county have the discretion to identify other potential uses. But the Act also provides kind of a three-pronged test that if you say, okay, we want to deviate from something that's specifically enumerated in the Act, and we want to do something that we think is still in pursuit of the ultimate goals of the American Rescue Plan. There's a three-pronged test to determine that. And then the burden of determining that falls to the recipient. You can't go to the Treasury and say, hey, we'd like to do this. Is this okay? They won't answer your question. They'll just refer you back to the Act and say, answer the three questions. So here's the three questions. The first is, what is the pandemic-related harm to be addressed? We've got those broad categories that we talked about at the very outset in terms of public health, recovery to the economy, lost public revenue, infrastructure. How does it address something related to those? And then how does the specific expenditure then address that pandemic-related harm? So what is the harm, and how does the money that we are spending help address that harm? And then finally, is the solution proportional to the harm? So this is the proverbial, right? You don't want to use a sledgehammer to kill a gnat. Is what we're proposing to do a logical, economical way to address the pandemic-related harm that we've identified? So important takeaway here is, if it's an enumerated use, it's pretty simple. We can just cite that. If it's a non-enumerated use, we do need to go through this three-pronged test to determine whether we believe it's eligible. And ultimately, if we deviate from an enumerated use, it's on us. It's on us to determine whether we think it's enumerated and be prepared to defend it, because there is no one out there who's going, that we can go to and is going to bless this. So towards that end, one thing that's very clear in the Act is that there is a high bar set for capital expenditures that are proposed to be made within either the public health or the negative economic impacts categories. One thing, and this was something that popped up between the interim rule and the final rule. And I believe it's because the U.S. Treasury saw that there was a lot of interest at first in terms of making capital expenditures for things like new buildings, improvements to buildings, acquiring property and building buildings. I mean, there was a tremendous activity, and we saw that in our work. At the very beginning, that seemed to be the thing of greatest interest as we started working with cities and counties across the U.S. So there was concern, I think, at the Treasury of, okay, are these really eligible, and are they proportional? So in addition, so for those things, for capital expenditures within public health and negative economic impacts, the three-pronged test that I talked about a moment ago, that applies, but there's more. So here, what's required, if you're going to do a capital expenditure within public health and negative economic impacts, and the project cost is $1 million or more, so pretty hard to imagine too many capital expenditures under $1 million. There is first a requirement, well, I should back up. So there is, in this case, a requirement to produce a written document, which they call the written justification. That's significant because when I talked about the three-pronged test before for enumerated and non-enumerated uses, this is something you didn't necessarily have to submit. This was just, okay, you need to be prepared to answer this. In this case, in some cases, you actually need to be prepared to submit this written justification to the Treasury. So the first piece is a description of the harm or the need to be addressed, similar to what I just covered. Now here's where we start building on it. Also required is an independent assessment of why a capital expenditure is appropriate. So this means the county can't answer this for itself. You need to get somebody independent of the county to answer this question of why this capital expenditure is needed and appropriate. And then lastly, a comparison of the proposed capital expenditure to at least two alternative capital expenditures. So, like I said, this is the three-pronged test kind of on steroids. And again, in some cases, a requirement that this actually be submitted. If the requirement isn't that it be submitted, you have to at least have it so that if Treasury asks for it, they can see it. And so this is an area that you really have to give some thought to.
Tom, this is Linda. I have a question in regarding this part, this independent assessment. Is that Baker Tilly for us?
It could be. It could be. We have been doing written justifications for clients. Generally, what we find is we usually end up working in tandem with the entity's engineer, architect, or both, because we're just, we're a lot of things, but we're not engineers and we're not architects.
Okay. And that comparison, could you go into a little more detail what that is, comparison of proposed capital expenditures?
Yeah, so what they're looking for literally is a side-by-side comparison of, okay, here's what we're proposing to do. Here's two other ways that we could do it. And so this is where we end up working pretty closely with engineers and architects to say, okay, well, so let's say we want to propose a new building, propose to build a new building. So one alternative could be, well, we could modify a building that we already have. So that could be another alternative. Another alternative is, well, we could lease space, for example.
Okay, thank you.
Just looking literally at side-by-side comparisons. And generally when we've done that, we essentially created a table, and then we usually will have kind of some of the, in the table, we'll also talk about some of the intangible pros and cons of the different approaches.
Thank you.
All right. So one of the things that we will be doing for you is working to look at eligibility, and we have I think a really terrific tool that we use to do that. We call it Eligibility Evaluation. It includes a whole bunch of things. It starts out with a questionnaire that we'll be working with your staff on. And we ask a series of questions designed to essentially answer the three-prong test and kind of pull, tease out all the things that we need to determine eligibility. So we've got a questionnaire. We've already been providing them to your staff. They've already been responding. Typically, what we find is we get that back. We usually have a few follow-up questions before we can then proceed, through the rest of the evaluation. But the evaluation then covers a variety of things. One of them is we will suggest what expenditure category that particular project should be reported under. The American Rescue Plan requires that when you're reporting your expenditures, you pick a single expenditure category. It can't be under more than one. So we'll make that recommendation to you. We will go through the interim rule, the final rule, and we will pull out citations and put that into our report. So here are the various places in the rule, the citations that we think support this particular project and assigning it to this particular expenditure category. We'll also take a look at, you may be aware, the U.S. Treasury has maintained a frequently asked questions list on their website. It's an excellent source of eligibility information. Hang on. Okay, I'm good. One of the things, came back from vacation, and they've got my computer set up for an automatic update of Windows, and so I'm scared to death now that it's going to shut off, but it tells me I have 23 minutes, so I'm good. So they maintain this list of frequently asked questions, and it is an excellent source. We will cite that if we see useful information, and we typically do. And then we'll cite other sources if appropriate. And there, what we find generally is if for capital expenditures for infrastructure, eligible infrastructure, water, sewers, stormwater, et cetera, we will pull out from the state's clean water and drinking water revolving fund criteria. We'll pull out that to show that it's eligible under those. We do a risk assessment, which I'll talk about in a little more detail here in a second when I can show you something in greater detail. And then we'll also give you next steps in terms of what you need to do in terms of records retention, reporting, if it's a sub-recipient, what you need to consider in terms of sub-recipient, that kind of thing. But one of the most useful tools, because I know a lot of our clients, when we first started working on this, really struggled with understanding, kind of risk. And we've been very, very conscientious about, I'm going to use the words risk today, and you'll see that we don't generally use it, though, in the criteria or in the evaluation tool, because we've been very mindful about not creating smoking guns for our clients, right? Because everybody has a different tolerance for risk, and just because something might be difficult doesn't mean you necessarily shouldn't do it. But it is important to understand, just how high is the bar that we have to get over for eligibility. It's good to understand that before you enter into it. So we came up with this this continuum that we call the burden of proof continuum. And if you start at the top, this is the lowest burden of proof. So if you're funding it from revenue loss, remember I said you could use that for provision of government services. And government services is anything you're legally allowed to spend money on. So it is by far the lowest burden of proof. Then we start getting into differentiations between enumerated and non-enumerated uses. Remember I talked about if it's enumerated, you're good to go. If it's not enumerated, you got those, the 3-pronged test that you need to apply. So whether it's enumerated, or not enumerated starts to create a higher burden of proof. Then you get into the form of payment. Is it a direct payment to a contractor or a beneficiary, or are we creating a sub-recipient? If we're creating sub-recipients, now our burden of proof starts to get a little higher again. And then we start to get into the various capital expenditures under public health and negative economic impact. And as I referenced earlier, the amount of documentation required there in the form of the written justification starts to vary by the amount, whether it's less than $1 million, more than $1 million, and again, you have enumerated and non-enumerated. So, at the end of the day, the highest burden of proof is non-enumerated capital expenditures in public health and negative economic impacts. Greater than, that says 1 million, greater than 10 million. And so we will indicate on the eligibility evaluation where you fall on this. And so let me see if I can switch things up in just a second. I want to just show you what a report looks like, one that we were working on for you. See if I can do that. Yeah, here we go. All right, James, are you seeing the eligibility questionnaire now?
Yes.
Great. All right, so here's one that we're actually working on for you right now. This one is for wastewater improvements to the Hickory Hills Park. So it starts out, as I mentioned, with a description. This is basically responses back from your staff in terms of a description of the project, the dollar amount, whether it's a reimbursement, whether there were any prior expenses. In this particular case, because it is proposed to be done under the infrastructure, there are questions here that weren't required, which basically go to the 3-prong test, which we don't have to do here because we're talking about an enumerated use under the infrastructure element. So we get to skip a whole bunch of stuff there. Then we get into the evaluation. So our recommendation here is going to be that it be reported under 5.2 eligibility expenditure category 5.2, clean water, centralized wastewater collection and conveyance. And now you're seeing all the various citations from the rule, from the frequently asked questions, and in this case, the other eligibility drawing from the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund program. So on the continuum, this one is not quite at the lowest, but darn close. It's the second lowest burden of proof because it's an enumerated use and a direct payment. So super easy on that one. We go into some next steps. And that's what that looks like. Any questions on reviewing eligibility? Okay. So lastly, just a brief refresher on reporting. The county does have to, given the amount of the award, the county is required to do quarterly accounting of its project obligations and expenditures in what's called the Project and Expenditure Report. Your next one's going to be due the end of July, coming up already. There are a number of things that are required in here. There's a profile of you as a recipient. That's a one-time thing. You are required to do an overview of your various projects. To the degree that you have sub-recipients and beneficiaries that qualify, they're $50,000 or more. It does require greater detail in terms of those, and then a certification. We'll work with your staff to make sure you've got everything you need to get your reports done on a timely basis, and if they have any, help them through if they have any questions on reporting. This is evolving. There's the Treasury keeps making changes to these reports, so we'll monitor that and make sure you're aware of any changes. But the important thing to remember here is there is a quarterly reporting requirement, and everything that I've kind of showed you so far today all sort of culminates in production of this quarterly project and expenditure report, pegging things into the appropriate use, and then tracking and making sure that you're complying with the uniform guidance. All of that culminates ultimately in your project expenditure report. And particularly if you end up doing sub-awards to sub-recipients, making sure that the agreements provide that they report back up to you the necessary data so that you can do your project and expenditure report. That's also key. All right, and so with that, you're experts now. You know everything you need to know, I think, as far as the American Rescue Plan. And I think it gives you a good sense of what the staff is going to be wrestling with as they go through and identify all the different projects. My understanding going forward is we've already received a number of projects that my team is working on. We'll be finishing up the eligibility criteria, eligibility evaluations for each of those soon. And then ultimately having another conversation with you about the ultimate expenditures once we've got all those evaluated and ready to present. James, is there anything I didn't cover that you wanted me to cover this morning?
No, I think I think you did a great job. Thank you for your time today. The one thing that I did, or I would like to discuss as well, is setting up a time for Baker Tilly and the board to get together to not only talk about the projects that have already been overlooked or to submit it on the questionnaire, but also create a work session for the remaining $15 million that we have left to allocate. And so, Tom, I don't know if you wanted to perhaps discuss something about planning on what we need to get ready for this work session for the remaining 15 million. I think that would be both beneficial for us and Baker Tilly to get just to be a little bit more effective during that work session.
Sure. So, James, for that work session, what you're anticipating is, are we starting with a kind of a clean sheet of paper for that remaining 15 million?
Well, I'll leave that up to the board on, I don't want to speak for them by any means, but at the same time, yeah, I guess I'll open it up to the board. I'll let them answer that question.
Well, before you do that, let me just throw out, I've seen, this is like fingerprints, right? I mean, this is like snowflakes. Every entity has taken a little bit different way of going at this, but it goes generally a few different ways. One way that I have seen that seems to work pretty well is at the governing body level, you basically say, hey, look, okay, so these are the various purposes of the American Rescue Plan, right? And we talked about them. It's, public health and negative economic impacts and revenue loss and infrastructure, premium pay, and the governing bodies have basically just looked at those categories and said, this is kind of where we want to focus our funds. Sometimes it's a single one, sometimes it's, well, maybe we'd like to do 50-50, of this category and that category. And that then gives the staff the direction to then come back with more specific proposals. So I've seen that approach. I've also seen, an approach that goes more towards, well, we'd like to solicit proposals and then consider proposals, and whether that's from the staff or the staff and the public. Obviously, as you start to get down that path, it becomes, takes longer, more people involved. And generally, there's still some guidance from the board needed in terms of, kind of, again, are there certain categories that you're going after? So I think that's something to think about for the board as you start to respond to James's question is, is this something that you as a group say, yeah, okay, we know we want to do it in this, in this expenditure category, this expenditure category, as long as it meets those, we'll consider them. Or do you want to try and open it up a little bit more? Something to think about.
Well, Tom, as part of your role, I think, in this deployment planning, I think that was helping us develop a strategy or a plan. So I think you're somewhat facilitating that for us, I guess, on which ways we want to go, to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
To give us things to think about as we're working through that process of, is this where we want to go? Are there things like this we want to consider or not? Or do and I think that would be helpful, or some type of a, like I said, when I know we were talking about an agenda for today, it was just like things for us to be thinking about so that we don't walk into that, totally blank and can really develop the planning part. I know right now we're kind of working a little bit differently because we did do some performance side of it, and so now you're looking at those projects for us, and we'll have reporting back to us on those. But at the same time, we're needing to very much plan for, I guess, what that 15 million, what we want to do with that, so that we are considering all the things that we could do with it and then what we want to do with it.
Okay. Well, let's do this. Let's pick a date. We have to do it right here and now. We can do it after, but let's come up with a date. We will put together a structured meeting that will facilitate your kind of stepping through how you want to, approach this. And so coming out of that meeting, we'll have a, consensus on, at least the broad brush, a process for allocating that remaining 15 million. How does that sound?
Yeah, I don't know. How does it sound to others? I thought we've talked about, helping other agencies or nonprofits. That's come up in our meetings. It's also come up just doing county projects and what things we can do as a county. Definitely, there's been a lot of discussion on county projects being priorities. So, yeah, but I think the consensus is what you're going to need for us to go ahead. I mean, $15 million is a lot of money for us to have a plan for, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely.
When do you think, I know you have approximately 100 of our projects that we, I think, forwarded, correct? For evaluation. Where are you in that process, and when do you think those will be completed?
I don't think it's quite that many. But we, I apologize. I got in at 11 o'clock last night.
No, that's fine.
And I'm still catching up a little bit. So I will check on the status. I think we promised James an update on status today. So we'll get that to James and he can convey it to you.
Yeah, I think the board would be interested in that. I think if you don't have those 100, I think that list that we had when we looked at what projects we have in phase 1 and phase 2, I think it's important for us as a board to know which ones fall off that list, which ones we're moving forward on, or which we've decided to do something differently with, so that we kind of reconcile where we were to where we are now.
I do just want to clarify, Tom, as well. The 100 that Linda is referencing is also calculating within. You won't have 100 questionnaires, but you will have within those questionnaires 100 sub projects that we have kind of grouped together for the same expenditure category for the same reasoning, and so we've all submitted. So that's where the number is coming from.
Okay, thank you. I was trying to figure out where the other 93 or so.
Oh, so you've got 10?
Yeah, and that makes sense. I mean, what we have covers a little over 11 million, so I think, yeah.
And maybe that's internal, James. Maybe we need to sit down and go through that list so that we know where we're at satisfied, not them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other item that I did want to talk about was this work session being in person. I don't know. I can see a lot of value for this work session to be in person, but that's also I wanted to bring that up to the board as well, and to have perhaps Tom talk about it, availability that way. I didn't know what the board was wanting to do for meeting with Baker Tilly and what this work session would look like. So I did want to have that conversation as well.
I guess I have a question. If we have some people Zooming in and some people in person, how valuable is the meeting with you in person, Tom? I mean, I know that's kind of a judgment call.
We'll make work whatever we need to make.
Whatever the board wants.
I will just tell you my personal observation on this is that as the world has changed and remote meetings, virtual meetings have become commonplace. I think that if anybody is remote, then you almost just as well should have everybody be remote, because it creates this sort of first class, second class citizens at meetings, right? Because you've got the people in the room and they can all talk to each other during the break and before and after, and you can have sidebar conversations. People who are online, they can't do that. Yeah. So, I think if the goal is to have it in person, it would be preferable, right, to have everybody there. If we can't make it work, we can't make it work, and we'll do the best that we can.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Anything else, James?
That's all I had.
Thank you, sir. Anything
So,
else?
James, do you want to just get together later and nail down a date?
Yeah, let's do that. I will. I'll, depending on what your availability is, I'll get on the phone with you. We'll discuss a few of the projects, get an updates, and then we'll start discussing a time frame, and then I'll get with the board.
Great, and I would tell you, I mean, I hope we can do it in person. That would be my preference. I would love to meet all of you personally, so hopefully we can make that work.
Yeah.
And I just got a note from one of my colleagues that I think we have about 14 projects working right now.
Of course, we're most important.
Well, no, those are your 14 projects. We have much more than 14.
Oh, not clients. Okay.
Yours are the most important.
14 projects. Okay, gotcha. Super. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for your time this morning.
Any reports or information from the board? Entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
We are adjourned.